last episode. What we were doing is interfacing Rust with C#, and the way we did that was using external C functions with no mangle. And compared to the example that I was working on the other day, there was a small mistake that I was doing, and especially when receiving an object from from the external world, C#, what it is. I was using box, like for example in this example, I was receiving a box of JVS editor. Now, in Rust, a box is simply something that is wrapping an object that is created on the heap. So it's like a pointer in C. And what was happening was that because this comes in as a moved box with the syntax in Rust, Rust was taking ownership of this. And that means that at the end of the function, Rust will also drop it. So if in my simple example from 2 days ago, I was to call this function a couple of times, which I didn't, I only was calling one time, it will crash the second time because the underlying memory will be gone, would have been freed by Rust. So that was a mistake. So what I did yesterday, I started to work on the actual thing that is now part of my entire Rust big folder with all the sub. Work this out. Originally, I was going for this solution. So instead of having the argument passed as a, it was getting passed as a pointer, which was fine, it works, and it requires me to do this unsafe dereferencing. This morning I tried this one, so come in as a reference, and I was hoping that basically Rust would just treat it as a pointer, and it just gives me a better syntax to call this guy. And it worked as well, so I think this is what I'm going to go for. Else that I'm not super happy, and that's the fact that every time I write a function, and you will see today over and over, every time I write a function that needs to be used from both sides, from C# to Rust, I have to write it 4 times. So I have to write the actual function, I have to write the C projection to get it visible to C#, and then on the C# side, I have to write the I have to write the DLL import thing, and then I have to write the method in this class that is wrapping around that. Something else that at the moment I don't have, and I'm not sure if I will need it, or well, probably I won't have to have an active way of doing it, is I have no way for the Rust code to call the C# code. So it's a one-way communication pipeline. Only C# can talk to Rust. Rust cannot talk to C#, but I don't think that's the problem. Even for things like a feedback on something like, eventually there will be raycasting functions where you raycast to see if you hit some objects. That will probably be just C# initiating it and say, okay, do me a recast at this mouse position, and it will get a result if something was hit. So there is no reason for Rust to call C#. So that should be good. Let's move on. What do we have, first of all? What we have at the moment, hopefully it's still running. Right, okay, so what this is the editor starting, and this very nice blue thing, if you recognize, is the very same blue that we get as a sky color in the flight simulator game. So it's basically the default color that the renderer uses to render the background. So this means that it's actually now our Rust code that is rendering this through DirectX. So we will fix it. What is the objective for today is being able to open FBX. So right now all I can do is do this, select file, and nothing happens because there is no code in the background to make this happen. So we want to load an FBX. That should be reasonably easy because I already have the code to load the FBX. And once that is done, the idea is to have some sort of inspection on what 3D object and bone structure is part of that model, and we will put it in a tree view here that eventually we will be able to select the object, actually move objects around, change names of the object. Just stay down. Is Jaco, you cannot do this. You're too big. Come on. You cannot do this. Yeah. So, all right, okay, so enough babbling. So let's get to code. So what this editor will do at the beginning, again in AC1, the AC1 editor was able to actually load. It was weird because you could load more models. It didn't really have a concept of model, it had like a generic scene graph. So you could have potential, you could keep loading FBX and adding to the tree, but then what was happening when you saved, only the first one will be saved. So it was a weird thing. For this one, for now, I will keep it really simple, and I will say that there is only one model. Eventually we can change this. So four times I had to write this open FBX. 1, 2, it is 1. Let's build. Yeah, and then over to Rust 3 times, and the actual one that does something. So it's 4 times to write this, which of course now there could be a possibility here to start going crazy with macros or code generation. So in theory, for example, I could write it 1 time, and then I could have a generator program getting all the public function of this class that gets a mutable, that gets a self, and automatically generate this stub. Eventually they could also write a C# file with all the C# declaration, but I would imagine I will have probably 30-40 of these functions, small functions that do always the same thing. So probably the time it will look, especially at the beginning, like I'm wasting a lot of time writing 4 times the same stuff, but it will look like this at the beginning of the editor, where everything has to be done from scratch, but eventually the code will just be super easy to understand, and there will be no no magic, no hidden magic. Oh, how did this work? Oh, yes, there is a code generation working on the background, blah, 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 blah. I always prefer languages that don't encourage this kind of virtuosism in programming. I prefer, okay, that's exactly what I'm writing, you know. I have this function that gets called from that function and so on, no magic. All right, so let's move on. All right, we got the blue back. So open FBX, open this, and bang. Of course, it doesn't have the shaders. Of course. So let me do it. Let me take the shit. Rubinius is asking, is C# used mainly for UI desktop and the whole engine going to be Rust based? That's correct. So the entire engine and game is Rust. I'm using C# for the I'm using C# to create a material editor, so I can load in files in FBX, change the materials while I'm running the actual engine, so I can see the result of the material. I can change the shader settings, and so on. Then from the editor, I can save that file to something that the engine can load. We put the shaders, so in theory, this should work now. Let's try. Okay, it's working, but we cannot see shit. The reason why we never set the camera in the editor. Love, I need to learn what is a raid in Twitch. Okay, raid is when a streamer hosts you. Like so. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Green. So basically it's like I'm showing on his channel, right? That's so cool. All right, so we got the camera in position. Let's see if we can actually see anything from the editor. We are seeing something. Is the scale wrong? Having this centimeters scale all over the place. And then I started to write. Oh, here it is. Okay. We got the model. We have no lighting, so let me do the lighting. Why so dark? It doesn't look like lighting is working at all. It's time for a graphic debugger. Does it work with C#? Alright, it works. So X, bank, and print screen. Frame capture, close this. I see a couple of funny questions. All right, okay, so what we want to know is why the lighting is wrong. So we want to check the... So this looks okay. So that's our ambient light, our sun direction. That all looks... What is possible though is that the texture, for some reason, didn't go in. That's a possibility. And a possibility that we can totally check in the pixel shader. Constant buffer samplers. All right. So we have this guy set. But I don't. Shader resources. Okay, so the texture is not our problem, but I do remember that I have something. Materials. There it is. This is what it is. It was an override. There you go. This is our problem. It was doing this override. This is a system that I don't think I'm going to use. So in theory, without that override, it should load the texture. There you go. Yeah. Okay. Ooh. Right. Back to. So what I was saying, I want to see if I can have a camera that is moving around without being stuck in one position. In order to do that, I will need a couple of things. So first of all, I need to remember how the fly camera works, because I remember I had one in the sailing thing. So fly camera. So I need a mouse offset. Set. Let's just make it public so I don't have to fuff around with this. And write 300 methods for. Yes, I think an experienced programmer can learn a lot from Rust. I will be very surprised. I mean, I only have my experience, but I've been working for 20 years with C++, and learning Rust changed the way I code even in C++. So yes, there is a lot of stuff to be learned in a good way. The big problem with Rust, I was talking about this at the beginning of my of my video on Wednesday. The problem is that you need to approach it willing to learn and willing to change the way you think about code and you organize code. If you go into Rust trying to replicate the data structure that you are accustomed to work with in C++, it will be an incredibly frustrating experience. That was my first experience with Rust. When I start with any new language, the first thing that I used to try to implement is some sort of tree structure, but not a binary tree, but a tree that has basically a node, and that node has a vector of other nodes under it, and possibly in a object-oriented way where you have polymorphism in the nodes. Now, if you try to do something like that in Rust, you're really into a lot of pain. You are in a world how one possible way, but then you start to work with things like ref cells, and ref cells is one of those things that while I was reading on the Rust book, I was like, I don't want to ever use something like this. I want to try to write my code in a way that I don't need to cheat and use things like, I think they call it interior. So it's great if you're willing to learn. The problem is if you're doing real work and you have a deadline, and the deadline is coming, and you start fighting with the borrow checker because you are trying to fix something on the fly. That's a scenario I don't know how it's going to work with Rust. Have I set a deadline for this project? No, I haven't. Because I still didn't really even commit to a particular project. So once I commit to a project, Like, for example, if I say, okay, I'm going to do a sailing game, I'm going to come up with a set of features that I would like to have in the game. At that point, I can start to figure out realistically how long it's going to take. Of course, I would prefer not to go over 24 months of development to have an idea. The other thing that I tend not to like, but probably is just my problem, I don't like how a lot of open source Rust projects tend to write the code. So they seems to be always looking for the virtuosism instead of going for the obvious thing. So that's a part of the language that I don't like. I don't like languages that try to be smart. I like languages that just write code in a most simple way. That's why I've always been a huge fan of Go, which is probably as far as the opposite from Rust you can go. And sadly, in Go, you don't have the necessary performance to write a game with it. But if Go had the performance, I would definitely be writing this in Go and not in Rust, which is ugly as fuck. Should this be a method? Should this be a method of mouse info? So it should be something like update. All right, okay, so first question, VR. Yes, especially because my idea, if I go for a sailing game, will be to bring the experience of racing simulations in the sailing game. So the idea is to lock the view in the cockpit of the boat, so in front of the helm. Very similar situation to a racing game, and of course it will look amazing in VR. So it's definitely part of what I would like to do. If I do a sailing game, I want to do it in VR. Vulkan, I'm studying. So I don't know if Vulkan is something that I will be able to handle, but I'm working on it. You can see here I have there you go. I have my small Vulkan project that I'm working on. When I have time, I look into it. What I'm trying to do is following the various Vulkan tutorials, but try to reorganize it already in a way that makes me understand that I understand. And right now I'm not very, this is what I have right now. That's all my Vulkan level. So, oh yes. How this? Because of course, because I'm not sending the keyboard commands. So yeah, I can turn around, but I will have to write the code for the keyboard. Okay, but why is not working? It should work. Because I'm resetting the position like an idiot, am I? Yeah, I'm resetting my position like a moron. Of course it will not work. Alright, so this should allow me to fly around. Hello? Did I? Okay. That's cool. That's super cool. Ha ha ha. That's great. It took me a little bit longer than I hoped for. I was hoping to start already this morning with the inspector. And yeah, okay guys, I think I'm done for today. Have a happy Easter, everybody. I think Monday is supposed to be holiday, but I don't give a shit. I will be online Monday morning at 10 o'clock, like today. So I hope to see you there, and bye bye, ciao.